Today on Truck Tech, our performance diesel won't be thirsty for fuel with the installation of a lift pump.
Plus, we dynoed a 292 straight 6.
Wow. Yeah, baby! Woo-hoo! Yeah! All right, you're pretty well lined up. Drop it down.
Coming south.
Yeah, we're good.
Sweet. Dude, this thing is dirty. I told you we should have washed it.
It's just a little bit of burnt rubber and dust. What's the problem?
Yeah, burnouts on a black truck in the rain. Gotta love it.
Hey, it was fun. Worth it.
Right. When you're talking Duramax, what you might not know is that it wasn't until the L5P that they actually installed a lift pump in the fuel tank. That means from the LB7 to the LML, they had none. So that factory CP3 and CP4 is pulling all that fuel from the back, bringing it up front. And that's good for about 500 horse, but when you're talking serious horsepower like we want, I mean, it'll be starving for fuel, you know?
Absolutely. So the fix is to install a lift pump, and we're going to be running a FASS Titanium Signature Series 250. Now, we picked this up from Summit Racing, and it flows 250 gallons per hour of fuel at about 8 to 10 PSI. So it'll feed that CP4 in our case and keep it nice and fed. But this is more than just a pump. It's also a filtration system. It'll remove any dirt and, most importantly, air from the fuel to keep the injectors and the injection pump nice and happy. Now, you might be wondering why we took the whole bed off the truck. And that's because of this. We're also going to be installing a fuel tank sump and bulkhead fitting so we can have a massive 5/8" feed line to feed that pump. We can drill a few holes in the tank, and it's just a whole lot easier to do it with the bed off rather than pulling the tank out and doing the work from underneath.
For sure. Well, let's push this dude forward, drill a hole, and drain some fuel.
I like it.
Yep, every time. I'm gonna do a bucket swap. Oh, that didn't work. Got it.
Yeah, but look how much you got on the floor, though.
Whoa, but look, I prepared. I put pig mats.
You got 2 pig mats, but you got 5 square pig mats worth of area wet.
2 drops hit the pig mat. And we're done. I seriously have no idea why I clean anything. I mean, really, look at the floor. I would definitely say there is 0 turning back now because we have a large hole at the bottom of our fuel tank. We're committed. So we definitely didn't need to run a sump with this kit for it to work properly. But why not? This bowl is going to mount at the bottom of the tank and allow you to pick up fuel from the lowest point possible. Therefore, it'll minimize the chance of sucking up any air into the system. Now, when it comes to choosing a mounting location, there's really no right and wrong decision. In the past, we mounted them in the back, and that'll ensure that if you launch the vehicle, let's say you're low on fuel, all that fuel is going to slosh to the back, you'll still have some in the suction bowl. Now, we chose to mount it in the front for one reason. That's because our pump's going to live somewhere in this area, and that gives us a super short suction side, probably be about 1 foot long. If we were to run it in the back, well, we'd be adding 3 or 4 feet to the whole system. So just note, make sure you fuel it up before you launch it. These little dealy whackers will sneak in the back side. That way that bowl can clamp right on down. Beautiful.
Hey, man, how's the plumbing working?
Dude, I always find myself on the south end of some fluid elevation changes.
Hey, we got a raincoat in the corner. You could have put that on.
I don't wear raincoats. But dude, we're all done. The bowl's mounted up, ready to mount the pump. And after that, we can slam it down, access the top, put our bulkhead, make some connections, wrap it up.
Hey, that's progress. When it comes to mounting stuff like a fuel pump or anything else on a frame, I kind of like to color outside the lines every now and then. This kit does come with a bracket that mounts the pump kind of right up in this vicinity here, above the rocker panel, but on the outside of the frame. Now, there is one reason why we're not too fond of that location, and that's protecting the pump. Now, the tire is sitting right behind it, so anytime you drive in the rain or the snow, or maybe you're just doing burnouts, there's a lot of debris that could get on the outside of this pump. Now it is sealed up and it will take it, but I just want to protect it a little bit more. Hey, toss me those brackets, would you? So there are 2 brackets that come with this pump kit. One that bolts onto the pump itself and one that bolts onto the bed. This one is getting tossed. The bracket that bolts onto the pump, I'm going to chop it in half and shorten it up. I'll bolt the pump to it, and I make a few other pieces of metal that kind of look like some kind of crazy science fair contraption, and that's how we're going to mount our pump.
And you'll see LT's over-engineered bracket next.
PowerNation is brought to you by Rock Auto.
With the pump side of the bracket taken care of, now it's time to move on to that high school science fair project I was telling you about. So I had to get a little creative. The bracket that we're going to be attaching the pump to on the frame has a nice radius to it. So I started out with some flat stock and I made a bracket that has the same matching radius on it. Now the pump ultimately is going to sit kind of up here, but this shape by itself isn't very strong. There's a lot of flex that's built in. So I have a gusset that's going to go through this little slot. I'm going to stick it in there and weld it all together. Now, this might be just a little bit overkill. I'll give you that. But if for any reason you maybe roll the truck over and you need an extra tow point, you've got one covered. All we got to do now is weld with the truck, not catch ourselves on fire. It might look like there's a whole lot that's going on here with the fuel lines, but honestly, the plumbing for a lift pump is not that difficult. It all starts at the sump, and there's a nice short suction line into the pump, which means there's minimal chances of the fuel cavitating and picking up extra air. Once the fuel is in the pump, it goes through the filter, and that's where your normal dirt and contaminants are trapped and prevented from going up to the engine. After the filter, it goes into the water separator, and that's where the magic happens. Not only is the water removed from the fuel, but any extra air is also taken out, so there's nothing but pure, clean fuel going up to the engine. On top of the pump, there's a small regulator which keeps the fuel at around 8 to 10 psi, and it feeds into the factory hardline heading up to the LML. And then any excess fuel that the engine isn't going to use simply gets returned back to the tank. And that's the last bit of plumbing that we have to finish up.
We'll have this little dude wrapped up lickety-split.
What are you making, pierogies or something?
Yeah.
Really, the last thing that we have to do is find a hole somewhere in this tank to return the fuel back into. Now, a lot of lift pump kits will actually come with a fitting that you insert into the filler neck. Now, you have to cut it in half and the line just kind of tees in like that. But honestly, I'm just not keen with cutting the filler neck because every time you fuel up, there's a slight chance that it could leak and drip a little bit of fuel onto the ground. And that's just wasting money.
And on this truck, we actually lucked out. We could utilize the factory supply side, which we would cut this hose, and that barb on the fitting will be the same diameter as our return line. We could pop it right in, fuel will be returned right back in, but it's still not the best method.
Now, that's because it has just a little bit of restriction. Now, this fuel pump pushes 250 gallons per hour of fuel. Now, that's like 5 barrels. That's a whole lot. Now, when you're under wide open throttle, that's not a big deal because most of that fuel is getting sent straight up to the engine to be burned and turned into horsepower and burnt rubber. But when you're driving around town, idling or sitting in traffic, most of that fuel is going to be returned from the pump back into the tank. So you need a return line with very minimal restriction.
And to do it properly, they supply this bulkhead fitting, which has a return side and a suction side. Now, we're not using it in the sense that it was made to because we're not utilizing that factory suction side. That's coming straight from our sump to our pump. So we're gonna flip them and utilize the big diameter for our return. That way we get it all down with, you know, minimal effort, really.
I'm down for getting down. Now, the one last deviation that we're going to make from this kit is using the intended suction tube as a return. That way, basically, there'll be minimal splashing of the fuel, because if it comes out here and splashes down, that's just going to add a whole bunch of air into the fuel. Now, granted, the FASS pump will take all that air out, but why give it extra work to do?
For sure, and I found the perfect spot for the bulkhead. Did forget that drill, though. I'll be right back.
You get the drill, I'll take a nap.
Yep, that would help. Next, it's dyno time, baby. That's good.
All right, now here's the real trick.
Forward.
I literally cannot see how far we are away from that.
Just keep going. And down.
Well, I guess for now that just about wraps up the fuel system on Dragonali, because honestly, until we get the motor back together, there's no reason to do the injectors or the injection pump.
Yeah, for sure, and the C10 seems to be in the same boat because we still have no motor inside this guy.
Well, actually, I did just get a text from Pat, and he said the motor's put together, it's on the dyno, and they're just about to start it up and break it in, so I say we go check that out.
I knew he was getting close. Dyno day, baby.
Check wide open throttle, I might. All right.
I've got to say, Pat, this thing looks a heck of a lot different from the last time we saw it torn apart on the bench.
When did you guys start dressing alike? You look like the Bobsy twins.
You like the new duds?
I actually do.
Anything to not look like you.
Oh, man. I know. It's hard to be this sexy.
It's harsh. You know, the first thing I noticed is there's no turbo on it yet, so I guess you're doing a pull naturally aspirated first,
Well,
huh?
the idea with that is to keep it simple. I want to make sure it has no oil leaks, no water leaks, and not that the turbo is you know, a big factor in that. We want to keep it as simple as possible, so there's nothing that's going to make a funny noise, and it's hard to tell when there's a turbo involved. So but now it's been run, and we're actually ready to make some power pulls.
For sure, and this will give us a good baseline. That way, when we throw the boost to it, we know what to actually expect.
Right.
Exactly. Well, they think this looks great, and I'm really excited to hear how it sounds, so what do you say we go make a couple pulls on it?
I love it. Have you ever heard one of these run before?
Oh, absolutely.
Not like this, you haven't.
Yeah, that's where it starts to sound good.
It sounds like an airplane.
Awesome oil pressure, everything. Let's see what we got.
You guys will hate me for saying this, but that almost sounds like a Skyline motor.
You shut your trap.
269.
Wow, 220 horsepower. So these came from the factory with like what, 165, right?
Yeah, 160, 165 is what we looked up, you know.
This thing has way less compression. It does have better flowing head, but other than that, you know, it's already 60 horse above what it came from.
Yeah,
the
not even 8-to-1 on the compression,
Yeah.
huh?
All right, all the vitals, everything looks good. You guys got to rock, paper, and scissor it for the first one to the console.
All right.
I'm out. Okay, I never done this before. Mike, come back.
This thing, you don't even have to get the gas pedal. Hit the, just hit starter. Watch what happens. No, you got to hold of it. The most important thing on this is oil pressure. Obviously, you want it, if that goes down at any point, you abort the pull.
What I want to hit on it.
Okay.
When
now,
you go to full throttle and you see the RPM stabilize at 2 grand, you hit D, and that starts your sweep. When it gets up to
Got
the
it.
5,000, you'll hear the brake pull the engine down. Just pull out of it. That's all you got to do.
keep going, keep going, keep going. All the way open. Okay, D.
D.
Hold on to it. Now watch this. Don't worry about anything else. Just there.
Perfect. Nice.
I like it.
Nicely done.
So, okay, cool.
Scaring the bejesus out of me.
220. See, your pull was better than mine.
220.
Dude, that's awesome. 220.
This is pretty nice. Yep.
That's consistent little dude.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. All right, LT, it's your turn to drive.
Hey, sign me up.
Less talking, more driving. Let's go.
All right.
Hey, you know, the coolest thing about this whole project is we never really set out to make a ton of horsepower. You know, we just wanted something that was oddball, and I definitely think that we got it.
I think Pat's about to slap you in the back of the head.
You're messing around. Come on. You got him.
Come on, Dad. Where's the throttle?
S.
S.
Activate.
Activate.
Start.
Start.
Oh, you're just like an old pro. Look at you go.
Holding it too long like that puts a lot of heat in the combustion chamber. It'll kill power.
There you go.
219. 19269.
All
Man,
right.
that thing it is printing numbers.
Yeah.
It's very, very consistent.
So the engine's broken. It's making awesome power for, you know, NA with the compression before the turbo. With the valve spring change, I think we're on the knocking on the door over 400 easy.
All right, well, what are you waiting for? Let's get the turbo and bolt it on.
Yeah, dude.
Come on.
It's not
that easy.
It's not that easy.
Oh, you guys make it sound
Oh,
complicated.
my God.
Next, wiring made easy, especially since we phone a friend for the job.
PowerNation is brought to you by Rock Auto.
All right, I got the old wiring out, so that means we have a blank slate and we're ready to start from scratch.
I just got finished up on pre-prepping the tail lights assembly, so we're ready to go there.
Well, as you guys might guess, today we're going to be wiring up our C10, and I have Scott Bowers from Ron Francis Wiring, and he's going to make my job a whole lot easier.
Boy, we hear that a lot. So we do make wiring kits that are really easy to install, but I'm here to help.
All right, well, where do we get started then?
Well, I do see an empty engine compartment here. It'd be nice to have the motor in there, or maybe even see it to know where all the components are.
Yeah, hey, that's easy. We got it next door. It's actually on the dyno, so let's go take a look and we'll get an idea of what goes where.
All right, cool.
Well, this is probably something that you haven't seen all that often, a 292 straight six on the dyno.
That's pretty cool. You don't see one of these every day.
No,
Wow.
you do not. You know, our whole goal just was to be different and kind of make something that's oddball.
I think you're getting there. So, can you tell me some parts and areas where we're going to have components going, like the alternator?
Yeah, the alternator, that's easy. That's going to sit really low right here on the driver's side. There's plenty of room on the fender well. This straight six kind of just right down the middle of the engine bay, and the engine bay is huge. So plenty of room to run the wiring down the fender well and right to the alternator.
Okay, and what kind of alternator?
We're just going to run a one-wire alternator. That way we don't have to mess around with an external regulator or anything else like that.
That makes it real easy. Okay, and how about the starter? Where's that going to be?
Yeah, the starter, just like on a small block Chevy, kind of sits down low on the passenger side. Now, there will be a turbo that sits up here, but there is plenty of room to get the wires kind of from the firewall and run them down. I left space between the downpipe and the block, so that shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, and how about gauge wiring?
Most of the gauge wiring is actually going to come from the EFI unit. I got a little interface box that'll tie into the Dakota Digital, so we don't have to run separate sending units for things like water temperature or for an RPM pickup. But oil pressure, I do have to get that from down here on the side of the block, but that's okay because I still have room in that same spot where the starter wires are going to run.
Okay, well, it really makes it simple. There's not too many wires running out to the engine, so I think I have everything I need. We can get started wiring.
Sounds good to me. So Scott, one thing I noticed is your kit actually does away with or eliminates entirely the factory firewall connector. What's the story there?
Yeah, that's right. So number one, it's a really good source of corrosion. These firewall connectors tend to fail, and as you can see, this one is all corroded up with a lot of green stuff. So we get rid of them. And number two, you got a very limited number of circuits passing through it. So when you're adding fuel injection and the other items that you're just surpassing its ability. So we like to stick a grommet in there, and that reduces the problems found with these things. So if you can just stick that in there, we'll keep going.
Alrighty.
Complexity of your C10 project, I would say it's sort of like a 4, 5. A more complex build that would be on the 9-10 level, you're talking about a lot of power accessories, actuators, remotes, remote start, remote door locks, air ride. You add that all together and you're starting to bring upon yourself a build where there's a lot of wires running in different directions, and you know, it's one thing to do it, it's another thing to do it and make it real clean. And I like working with my hands, I like working on cars. I'm a car guy, I have several builds of my own that I play with, and it's certainly fun to come work on a neat, clean project that has no wiring in it that I can just start right away and get at it. If someone can't get their arms around the idea of electrical, that's where we step in. We have a full suite of products that covers everything from complete wiring kits to light bulbs and switches. And we try to make it easy for the guys who either can't or don't want to do it. Our wiring kits are so intuitive, between printing on the wires, telling you where they're coming from and going to color-coded wires right to the panel, to complete instructions in each package to tell you exactly what you need to do. It all works, right? You turn the key and you just try the light switch and everything works. Yeah, it's a good feeling.
All right, hit that brake pedal. Let's see what we got. 2 lights, they're red and they're really bright, so that means we'll be safe driving down the road.
Nice and bright.
Absolutely.
That's what I like.
Those LEDs, those are bad, man. I love it. So I guess we're making progress, right? Other than the fact that the motor's not in and I got a few things left to wire up.
Yeah, you just got a couple loose ends up there, but no big deal.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. We can handle it. Now, if you guys have any questions about any of the parts that you've seen on the show today, check us out at PowerNationTV.com. And we want to give a special thanks to Scott from Ron Francis Wiring, because without his help, this truck wouldn't be going anywhere. But what do you think of it, though? Like, do you like the patina? Some people don't.
It's excellent. I really like the finish you got going on there and the whole stand.